This video discusses a faction of villains from the Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Links in the description. Spoilers ahead. Greetings, salutations, and other big words. My name's Ethan, my handle's Wrangler. Welcome to Frequency Studios. Love it or hate it, the Fourth Wing has been a hot topic of conversation in the reading world as of late. People debate whether or not it's actually any good, if the romance aspects were too much or not enough, if the vernacular was appropriate to the setting, so on and so forth. But I'm here to take a deep dive into the one important question about this book that no one else seems to be asking. Who can kick a Venin's ass? As the series' big bad, the Venin present is interesting and powerful villains that are almost impossible for most folks to kill. And it got me thinking, who are some of my favorite characters who have the means to put one of these dark wielders down for the count? So, we're going to go over a few of these characters, what they can do, how they fight, and how it is that they can truly defeat one of these Venin. But before we do that, let's take a glance over who the Venin are and what they can do, considering the current information we have on them. As the rest of this series comes out, we may learn new information that would change the determinations on this list. In other words, I could be wrong. Also, there will be spoilers aplenty in this video. Now, with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's rock. The Venin. Hailing from a region known as the Barrens, the Venin were thought by most to be the stuff of myth, but few knew the unfortunate reality. Venin were real, and they were friggin' nasty. According to the old tales, it all started with three brothers, one bonded with dragons and one with griffins. Through these bonds, they were able to wield magic, but the third brother, who shared no bonds, desired to wield magic of his own. He became jealous of his brothers and began to seek other means of attaining power. Discovering that the source of the magic that they wielded was from within the earth itself, he managed to tap into it directly. Not channeling through a dragon or griffin, the direct draw corrupted his spirit, turning him into something else. So I was thinking about this magic system as an electrical circuit. Earth is the power, the wielder's abilities are the load, and the energy disperses back to ground. And the dragon is the variable resistor between the power and load. At first I figured that the Venin directly tapping into the source was too much power, and that's what corrupted him. But when a wielder draws too much power, he or she experiences burnout. The Venin don't have that problem. So now I kind of think of the dragons and griffins not only as variable resistors, but also as some kind of catalytic converter to keep the magical energy from corrupting the wielder's spirit. Maybe a transformer would be a better analogy, some kind of AC-DC conversion, but analogies and speculations aside, just know that pulling directly from the earth equals bad and creates a magical imbalance. What will this result in? What happens to someone if they break the proper balance of magic? Well, for starters, it doesn't seem like such a big deal. The wielder has direct access to power and can use it to accomplish their goals. But this is like a magical bag of chips. You can't eat just one. After a while, the wielder will feel the need to channel again, not necessarily for wielding, but for consuming. As time goes on, the Venin will feel the need to consume more and more to satiate the appetite, likely becoming a more powerful individual over the years. But channeling the energy requires tactile transfer. They need to be in contact with the ground to pull from source, but can store plenty within themselves to wield during aerial combat. Some Venin can pull energy from a wide area around them in seconds, and those who are standing on the ground within this area also become drained. The land below a dark wielder's feet withers and wilts, a circle drained of life, quickly expanding outward as the Venin draws energy in like a Metroid. Many have tried to outrun the expanding area of siphoned energy. Most have ended up a lifeless and shriveled husk on the ground. Even griffins and dragons who fall within the area of influence wither to death in seconds, although being in an area that was already drained of magic can insulate against this. The books give us kind of a categorization system concerning their rank and power level. Whether becoming more powerful automatically means a rise in rank, I'm not certain, but it clearly is a tendency. First off are the initiates. When somebody draws directly from the ground, they'll get reddish rings around the outer whites of their eyes. This will fade back to white, but the red returns whenever they channel, and the more often they drain the magic, the redder the eyes will become as they grow in power. Next up are the Asems. These guys are a little further along in their spiritual misadventures and have varying degrees of redness in their eyes, depending on just how potent they're becoming. When you get them spun up or exerting some effort, the veins around their eyes distend. Going up another level, we have the sages. You can be fairly sure that you run into one of these guys by the permanently red eyes and distended veins. Sages really pack a magical wallop and are the ones who direct the initiates. Then there are the mavens, also referred to as generals. They too have permanently red eyes and distended veins, but what do we know about the folks at this level? Not much. So, what can these guys do? Well, they're more than just human energy leeches. For starters, a Venin tends to carry a staff, which they use in combination with hand gestures to wield magic. They can cast bolts of blue flames that can be devastating, even to dragons who are otherwise immune to fire. They can cast protective barriers to shield themselves from incoming physical and mystical attacks. They've cast enchantments that thrust their opponents high into the air, then slam them back down to the ground, cause objects on which they focus to disintegrate with the closing of their fists, and a nasty ability called pain projection, where they force energy into an opponent's body, making the poor bastard writhe. And then there are the Wyvern. They won't be factored into this matchup, but the Venin and the Wyvern go hand in hand, so I have to at least bring them up. These dragon knockoffs are mystical constructs of the Venin. Although they have physical bodies, they aren't truly alive. They're maintained by the energy of the Venin, and when that Venin dies, so do all his or her Wyvern. They're similar in size range as dragons and are able to physically brawl with them. And the imitation would not be complete without the ability to breathe fire, and these guys shoot streams of the same blue flames that the Venin seem to enjoy throwing around, as well as red and green flames, which means them dragons better come to battle wearing sunblock. Mystical issues aside, these Venin are a serious physical threat as well. In Melee, we saw one observe and then perfectly mimic the moves and style of an opponent, much like Tony Masters, aka Taskmaster from Marvel Comics. I don't remember seeing this a second time, so I don't know if this was a special talent of that individual Venin or something they can all do. But either way, you gotta always be ready to change up your fighting style to throw these guys off. One stabbed Violet with a green glowing blade, leaving her poisoned, and she likely would have died without the aid of a mender. But the biggest obstacle with these douchebags is their insane durability. They are absolutely immune to dragon fire and pretty much most physical attacks. We've seen them blown up in buildings, thrown around, and one was even buried by a massive rock slide, yet we've never seen one have so much as a broken bone. Although decapitation seems to be fatal, we've only seen it done once, and that involved Andarna, who has consistently been anomalous. So we can't count that as a method for victory, especially since we don't yet know why she was able to do this. Their magic can be neutered through the use of wards, which produce anti-magic fields. I'm not going to go into how they work in this video, but the important thing to know is that a special alloy that is disruptive to most magic that isn't dragon-based is required to make them. And if you have a blade made from this alloy, you're in luck, because this can put them down. Land a critical blow with this kind of blade and it will be fatal. Other than that, the only known weakness that they have is zero resilience to electricity. Violet's lightning powers are an insta-kill, if she can manage to hit her opponent. Work on that aim there, Sparky. Now, too bad we just can't aim the riders and flyers with tasers. That could take a lot of the hassle out of their jobs. So not only do these guys pose a serious and lethal threat, but they're almost impossible to kill, and the ability to either kill one or outright remove them from the battlefield is the win condition in this scenario. A couple of qualifiers. This is a random encounter. The character must be able to defeat the Venin using only the gear and abilities that are part of their usual carry. So Batman types that could do it through research and prep won't qualify if none of their regular equipment can finish the job. Also, we gotta keep it reasonable. Characters that are gods or have god tier power are overqualified. So we won't be seeing the likes of Ilgrathie, Bastet, or Listo make an appearance. This is nothing even close to an exhaustive list, so if you have a favorite but little known character in mind that you think could take down a Venin, let me know who and from what book series in the comments section. Maybe we'll all stumble across a new favorite today. This list is in no particular order, but the last one is from the Fourth Wing itself, a little theory I have about a character from Sorengel's very own squad that I think is being overlooked. And first up we have... Halsedric, from the Revenant series by Herman P. Hunter. Throughout the years, much has faded from Halsedric's memory, but one thing he could recall for certain was the axe swinging down upon him. And then he died. With the breath of life returned by the Creator himself, Halsedric was restored and went forth as a warrior for God. He is often stoic and mission-focused, although he does have a sense of humor, dry it may be, but his buddy Tolfgear can coax a quip out of him from time to time. He's a solid individual, and if you think he looks strong, you're probably still underestimating him. He has superhuman strength, which was demonstrated when he, while seriously injured, lifted his opponent with one arm and threw him across the street. He's also able to move faster than most. And speaking of seriously injured, he has a healing factor. Wounds that would be fatal to most without medical assistance, Halsedric just sleeps them off, waking up the next morning perfectly fine. But this does take time. He's not going to go regenerating missing organs during combat or anything crazy like that. And when it comes to his equipment, let's take a look at the item that puts him on this list. That would be his sword. When demonic magic and mystical abominations are near, his sword manifests flames that grow a deeper red as the threat draws closer. Halsedric's sword, when in his hands, is devastating to evil forces of this nature, and Venin would surely set this thing ablaze. Halsedric would have a bit of a struggle dealing with the area around him being drained while dodging mystical attacks. But if he manages to get up close and personal with these guys, that sword of his will ruin the Venin's weekend, along with any future plans of breathing. Aquila. From Aquila, Nightmare Fuel, by Edward Aardvark Kieran and Kari Salvayo. Apologies if there are any mispronunciations. When a Nebraskan cop responded to a cattle rustling incident, he found that the perpetrators were from another planet. When an interstellar police force arrived to stop the criminals, they witnessed Aquila holding his own against them. Impressed with his bravery, the Phoenix Guard recruited Aquila, he joined their ranks, and was stationed in the Sol system. As an officer in the Phoenix Guard, Aquila's strength has been increased tenfold. His uniform is a flexible yet durable armor called the Second Skin, and his helmet has an AI assistant which can scan areas and give intel. His braces allow him remote control of his ship and other equipment, as well as providing additional protection. His boots are called Phoenix Talons and are equipped with propulsion, magnetic, and gravity systems, allowing him to fly, attach to metal surfaces, or walk in other worlds as if it had the same gravity as Earth. He carries with him a portal device for which he uses to send detained suspects to the prison dimension where they wait for trial, but he can access other dimensions as well. He can also open larger portals if he connects the device to an external power source, like his cruiser, but if the Venin doesn't get his Wyvern here, then Aquila doesn't get his ship. Next, there is a Hyper Holster. This device can produce any handheld item that a Phoenix Guard officer needs, which he most often uses to generate a pistol or lasso, but this can only generate and maintain one item at a time. And let's not forget something that will be very important to him here, and that's his shield generator. The protective field held up against multiple weapons fire from the Black Skull Gang, including turret blasts from their starship. This guy is a paragon type, being all about justice and due process. Aquila has even tried to save the lives of those who just moments beforehand tried to kill him. Because of this, Aquila definitely won't be trying to go for the kill against the Venin. In fact, he'd probably try to reason with the guy first. The Venin have proven that they like to run their mouths at times, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did engage Aquila in conversation before all hell breaks loose. But the Phoenix Guard officer will be making use of his helmet scanner, AI, and head-up display to see what he can learn. No way of knowing if the scans would discern the Venin's weakness, but if it does, Aquila will be generating a taser from his hyper holster real quick. Or perhaps his pistol can fire electrical bolts, but we haven't seen that done yet, so it's just speculation. By the way, just how much juice would it take to put a Venin down?
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! Great God! What the hell is a gigawatt?
We know that a bolt of lightning is insta-death for them, but I don't think shuffling your feet across the carpet and giving them a static shock is going to hurt these guys in any way. The average bolt of lightning, according to what Google told me when I asked, is sporting about 300 million volts and 30,000 amps, or 7 gigajoules. And I'm going to hypothesize that it's not just the amount of power, but also the form in which it comes that can put a Venin down. For example, you may deliver an attack with that same amount of power and force, but if it's in the form of fire or blunt impact, it won't transfer the energy into the Venin properly to kill him. But a lot more force in those other forms at some point must be able to overwhelm the supernatural invulnerability. But I would say the same is in reverse. I don't think just any electrical jolt will kill them, but I bet a taser can mess them up just as much as the next guy. Aquila's force field has got the juice to hold off the mystical attacks, and since his boots give him flight, he can stay off the ground and out of contact with the Venin's energy draws. Whether or not Aquila's equipment can generate enough of a charge to kill a Venin, it really doesn't matter, because I just don't see him doing it. He'll eventually figure out, either through scans or trial and error, that electrical attacks work best, but he will do everything he can to incapacitate and detain the Venin. He'll probably stun him, and then stuff him elsewhere with the portal device, although I doubt Aquila would send him to the prison dimension where he could hurt others. He'd likely send the Dark Wielder to the X dimension, where there aren't other people for him to hurt, but he did send an oversized mutant critter there once. Let him snack on that for a while. The Venin may be scary, but as Aquila himself says, scary is what the Phoenix Guard was made for. Boris. From the Starshatter series by Black Knight. An ISEC officer and member of the IMS Starshatter's crew, Boris has come a long way from where he had been. And where he had been, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Abducted from his homeland by the Tazarans and sold to the Vaughn as a labor slave, the young boy, armed with nothing but his Bulgarian stubbornness, would spend the next 11 years in a mine. Upon arrival, he noted that 2 towering transmitters were on the mountainside directly above them. They were psychic nullifiers, and Boris's head throbbed whenever he looked at them, giving him his first hint that he was a telepath. With death being a constant companion of the slave camp, it wasn't long before Boris had his confirmation as the psychic imprints of those who died around him clung to his mind like vengeful spirits. One day, he found himself in an area where the nullifier's signal couldn't reach and began to understand his powers. He spent the next years planning, learning patterns and cutting deals with certain guards as he prepared for what needed to be done. He practiced his abilities when he could, and when the guards forced him to compete in the fight pit against other slaves for their entertainment, he used it as training. Until one day, when he had everything in place and the timing down perfect, he snuck up the mountain and destroyed the psychic nullifiers, setting his plan into motion, and then he unleashed hell. A telepath in the Starshatter universe means more than just reading minds. It comes with a host of potential psionic abilities, but Boris's specialties are pyrokinesis and atmokinesis. He can manipulate flames as well as manifest his own. He's also able to generate and direct heat within himself and in nearby objects, enough to melt stone in seconds. His atmokinesis allows him to manipulate and direct air currents, enough to generate gusts and whirlwinds on par with tornadoes. Not only can he push the air around, but he can also compress it dense enough to form blades capable of slicing a man in half. He can channel his psionic energy to boost his strength and speed to superhuman levels, and has even demonstrated this under the suppression of a psychic nullifier. Not to mention the psychic imprints, which boost his potency further. But because of this, constant emotional control is needed, as the imprints are always begging for release to exact retribution. His hand-to-hand skills should not be ignored. From his time fighting in the slave pits to further training with ISEC, he would be a force to be reckoned with even without his psionic abilities, and this is just scratching the surface of what he can do. Boris might first reach for his ISEC issue pistol. Now this pistol, from what I understand, can do some serious damage, but I'm still looking into how they operate. It looks like a compelling case could be made for this gun overcoming the Venin's invulnerability, but until I have a proper understanding of it, I'm not quite ready to push that argument. Besides, we didn't just go through Boris's history to have him waltz in and shoot the bad guy dead like an absent-minded cowboy passing through a town. We want to see them go head-to-head with their powers. The Venin would probably hurl a couple mystical attacks, only to have them blocked by Boris's psionic shields. At this point, I imagine that Boris would look into the Venin's mind to find out just what the hell this guy is all about. The Venin have some mind tricks of their own, like influencing people's minds in their dreams or implanting thoughts. But that's nothing new to Boris, who can do these same things and then some. He once squared off against multiple trained telepaths known as Breakers, whose job was just that, breaking minds. Yet Boris mopped the mental floors with all of them. Whatever meager resistance the Venin could offer won't slow Boris by much, and he'll see who the Venin are, as well as their weaknesses. And what if the Venin manages to get his hands on Boris? What if the Dark Wielder tried to drain him? I'd imagine that the Venin would immediately disengage as he discovers what it's like to drink from a fire hose worth of vengeful spirits, and these spirits will not play well with the likes of a Venin. No way of knowing if this would kill him, or if his invulnerability would hold up against this, but if he doesn't die, he'll quickly be wishing that he could as the psychic imprints try to destroy him from the inside out. Either way, this will take the Dark Wielder out of the fight. Then there's Boris's pyrokinesis. The Venin are immune to dragon fire, this is well established, but let's compare thermostats. Boris can turn metal and stone to slag in seconds, and tactile connection is not necessary. He can do this from a distance. He can liquefy large boulders, which is a whole nother level. Granted, we've seen dragon fire melt stone, but that was only on the surface. Obviously, the Venin must have a limit, but we don't have enough information to figure out where it is. So Boris overcoming them with his pyrokinesis is currently just loose speculation. But he could use his pyrokinesis to liquefy the ground beneath the Venin's feet, and when he sinks in, remove the heat, freezing him in place and out of the fight. By the way, freezing a Venin could be a bigger deal than you might think, but don't worry, I'll go into that theory a little bit later in this video. Honestly, Boris has so much going for him, and with his psionic shielding can no-sail pretty much everything the Venin throw at him. We just looked at 2 ways he could take a Venin off a battlefield, but let's do one more. Let's physically remove him. Boris can telekinetically fold space. How about that? If Boris really wants to make sure this Venin is dead, perhaps slam dunking him into a sunspot would do the trick. There you go. Battlefield removal and insta-kill, all in one shot. If Venin are giving you a problem, then meet the solution. Meet Boris. Muhammad ibn Fadlan. From Immortal Rising by Aaron C. and Jose Garcia. Ruled by the undead, the humans of planet Terra were slaves working on plantations. Werewolves, as well as lizard people, roamed the land and Dracula reigned supreme. Until one day, the deity Andrulicus challenged and defeated the Dark Lord, breaking the curse of eternal night, and the sun rose for the first time in ages. 5 years later, Muhammad ibn Fadlan of Juarez, who joined the Church of Andrulicus, has completed his training. This included becoming proficient with the weapons of Andrulicus, the sword and hammer, displaying humility by way of service to the unfortunate, learning all he could about the undead and how to destroy them, and he displayed true bravery when the holy city of Northgard was attacked. Kneeling before his priest as a neophyte, he was given the white robes of Andrulicus and rose as a brother of the dawn. His mission is to go out into the world and not just heal people in the name of Andrulicus, but seek retribution on behalf of the innocent. Muhammad's healing abilities won't be of much use here, unless they're powerful enough to return a Venin to his natural human state, and we haven't seen any feats from him that would suggest that he can. Use of the sword and hammer is what's going to matter, and they do more than just slice and smash. He channels the magic of Andrulicus through them, discharging energy attacks that are destructive to mystical abominations, and the Venin fall nicely into this category. We've seen him discharge a blast that utterly destroyed an undead opponent, and I've got no doubts that blasts of this nature would be harmful to the Venin as well. What we don't know yet is if he has any range with these energy discharges, or if they require contact with the opponent. Based on what we've seen, he'll have to take this to melee, which will be difficult. He doesn't have any shielding that I know of, and though I think he has some other magical abilities, we haven't yet seen any of them displayed at the time I made this video. Muhammad is going to have some of the same struggles as Halsedric. They're both melee fighters. They both channel their magic from the respective deities, and they both need to get into the Venin's personal space to use their one advantage. However, they're both smart and skilled enough to pull it off. Muhammad may struggle against a Venin, but he's got what it takes to come out on top, and he'll even stick around afterwards to lend an empathetic hand to those who were harmed in the attack. Stormbright. From the Curse of the Star Wraiths by the Lord Otter. While traveling for home on horseback across the plains with his older brother Serathis, Zolan, son of Colton, found himself in a wicked storm. No, not that kind. Yes, that kind. The clouds gathered without warning and a deluge washed down. The lightning spooked the horses and the brothers became separated. The next strike panicked Zolan's horse, and he was thrown from his mount's back and landed in a heap. Lifting his head, he could see nothing through the driving rain. Nothing but lightning. The haze of the brutal storm looked to Zolan as if it were converging and taking form until a giant of a man stood towering over him. Kalamtu, the chaotic god of storms, looked upon Zolan, looked into him, able to see the potential that the young teen held within, and connected Zolan's mind with his inner magic. That's when the name from deep inside his subconscious, Stormbright, flashed in his mind. With what he came to do complete, Calamity took his leave and the storm ended almost as quick while everything that had just happened faded to the back of Zolan's mind like a dream. The brothers found each other, then continued home for the village of Harskull. A few weeks later, their home was raided by the Ilgrathians from Alcaron, the governing kingdom of their region. Taken as slaves and separated from their father, the brothers would spend the next 2 years in a slave camp performing manual labor and competing in an arena. It's here that they met an Ilgrathian man and fellow slave named Trilgar, who took the boys under his wing and began training them. Zolan learned well, but Sarathis was a natural, and also a quick study when it came to some of Trilgar's thieving skills. But one day, while the brothers were protecting another prisoner from a bully, Zolan's abilities manifested, and he discharged an electrical jolt. The one they had rescued asked their names, and this is when it occurred to Sarathis that he was no longer the boy who had first arrived at this facility. Being here had changed him, and he looked down at the contraband dagger in his hand. This place had hardened him like the metal of that blade, and he answered steel. Their fellow prisoner looked to Zolan for his response, and the name flashed back from his subconscious, prompting him to answer Stormbright. Using the rapport they had established with Adis, who was, "We'll be nice and just refer to him as facility staff," they managed to keep this ability under wraps until the day that an Ilgrathian soldier of fortune named Commander Talek saw them perform in the arena. With arrangements made by Adis, Talek purchased them to use as additions to his mercenary team, for whom they fought well until the opportune time when they made their escape to what was left of a society called Divinrost. Plagued by Ilgrathian attacks as well as a nasty curse, Steel and Stormbright joined Queen Katala for a time, offering their aid, and it's here that a woman named Sherizlan began training Zolan in the ways of magic. So, what can this guy do? First up is his inner sense. When mystical energies are moving, he can feel it. He can also sense the presence of other magic users. From his time with Trilgar and later his brief stint with Commander Talek, he became quite competent with the short sword. He resisted temptations placed before him by an otherworldly entity called Obel, who was testing his strength of character. And of course, there's his aeromancy. He can conjure storms, direct rain and wind, summon lightning from the sky, and even discharge it directly from himself at an opponent. Zolan would be able to sense the Venin's presence and when the Dark Wielder is about to cast. Although he doesn't have a way to shield against the attacks, knowing that something is coming at least gives him a heads up, and he would need to stay out of the immediate area when the Venin starts drawing from the ground. But most of that shouldn't be a problem. Zolan doesn't even need to get close to these guys. He can call lightning from the sky or discharge it from himself. His success rate on direct hits with his strikes is about 3 out of 5, and he can even generate an electrical storm if he saw fit. This one is kind of a no-brainer. In fact, it's almost funny. Out of everyone on this list, Zolan is probably the least skilled, yet would have one of the easiest times against these douchebags. He just happens to have the exact right hack for this job. None of these guys are going to want to mess with Stormbright. Samus Aran. From the Metroid series by Nintendo R&D1 and created by Makoto Kano. You might be saying, Samus isn't an indie character and her powers are god tier. What's she doing on this list? Well, first of all, I'm a Metroid nut and will work it into any conversation I can. And second, to illustrate a point, it's not Samus's powers and abilities that we're focusing on here, but rather that of the series' titular creature, the Metroid. Biologically engineered by the Chozo, the Metroids were designed to be predators for the dangerous X-Parasite. But due to a conflict between the Thoha and Malkin tribes, the Metroid handlers were killed and the creatures began roaming wild. This was bad news because the way these creatures worked was by latching onto prey and draining it of its energy in an instant, leaving a lifeless husk, though there were never any traces of physical injury. Starting to sound familiar? Metroid means Ultimate Warrior in the Chozo language, and it was an appropriate naming convention. The Metroids go through multiple metamorphoses in their life cycle, but the key thing here is that they are living energy-to-matter conversion machines. These guys drain the prey of its energy, growing larger as it does, and they're invulnerable to attacks. They're also capable of expelling energy and even sharing it to restore another's health. Just imagine right after a Venin drains an entire area that a Metroid clamps down on his head. That Metroid would be like,
"Oh yeah, now that's the stuff!"
So, how does Samus take these critters down? with her Ice Beam. You see, cold is not an energy in and of itself, but rather a lack of energy. Take the air conditioner in an automobile as an example. It doesn't cool down the passenger compartment by blowing cold air. What is actually going on is that the vents are pulling the air out of the passenger compartment, removing the heat via refrigerant and expelling it out through the condenser. It then returns the air to the passenger compartment through the vents without the heat. The AC system is taking the heat and dumping it outside the vehicle, leaving that cool, refreshing air inside that we all love on a hazy and humid day. When Samus freezes a Metroid, energy transference is greatly reduced if not halted, leaving the Metroid vulnerable to attacks. Which brings us to my theory about that overlooked rider, and you probably already know where I'm going with this. Ridoc.
You're as cold as ice!
From the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. A rider from Violet's own squad, Ridoc Gamlen's pretty good with a sword, nimble enough to keep his footing atop a flying and struggling dragon, the squad's best climber and quintessential class clown. If you ever require someone to take down an unbeatable threat all by himself using nothing but whoopee cushions, Ridoc's your guy. He also carries the special alloy blades that can kill Venin. You might say, so what? So do all the other riders and flyers. What sets Ridoc apart from them? Well, it's more than his penchant for pranks that'll make him dangerous to a dark wielder, although it probably could come in handy. In fact, Rebecca Yarros, if you ever happen to see this video, please, I'm practically begging you here, give us a scene where Ridoc sets up a clever prank that winds up taking down a bunch of Venin in a hilarious way. That'd be awesome. But we all know that his signet is the reason I'm bringing him up. He is an ice wielder and far more powerful than people give him credit for. He can form icicles in his hands and cool the temperature of a room, but those are just parlor tricks. If we want to know what he's really capable of, then let's look at his encounter with a not-so-friendly dragon. He and his team were trapped with nowhere to go when a dragon let loose with his fire breath. In an instant, Ridoc erected a massive wall of ice, protecting him and his friends from a continuous stream of dragon fire. We don't know exactly how long it lasted, but based on previous counts during the dragon's deadly exhales, it's probably safe to estimate around 10 seconds. How hot is dragon fire? It can incinerate a human being to ash, skeleton and all, in an instant. Crematoriums can't even do that. They operate at 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit and take an average of 2 to 2.5 hours to accomplish this. Dragonfire does it in less than a second. Yet Ridoc maintained a protective wall of ice through 10 seconds of this. That means he had to continuously remove the heat from the wall to maintain the ice while the flames continued to pour on. That is some ridiculous amounts of BTUs. He blistered his hands for the effort, but he did it, allowing him and his friends to survive. If he can maintain ice in that kind of pressure cooker, then he's potent enough to freeze a Venin. And with the energy transference stopped, he could casually walk up to the Dark Wielder and jam his alloy blade into the Abomination's frozen heart. They might be fixated on Violet Sorengale, but if my Metroid hypothesis holds up, then the Venin should also be very concerned with Ridoc. Those are just a few of the characters that could tussle with these leech people, but maybe you see it differently. If you see a flaw in my determinations, point it out and let me know where I might have gone wrong. Also, who might you have in mind? Hit those comments and tell me about your favorite unsung heroes. If you're an author or creator and think one of your characters has what it takes, let us know about it in the comments section. Tell us who the character is and what they can do and how they would go about kicking one of these boogeymen in the nards. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any theories on where this series is going to go, feel free to leave them in the comments as well. I look forward to reading them. If you enjoyed this presentation, hit the like, and if you didn't, I appreciate you stopping by. I'll see you next time, and God bless.